Managing COVID and keeping it out of New Zealand over the last year has been a massive team effort. And while I know we're all familiar with how lucky we are, especially as we watch some countries only now just starting to gather with friends and family again, we still do not forget that the position we find ourselves in has still come at a cost. One sacrifice that has been particularly hard for many to bear over the past year has been not being able to see friends and family who live in Australia. Our health response now gives us the opportunity to connect with loved ones again as we start a new chapter in our recovery. Cabinet was presented with advice today that the conditions for opening up quarantine-free travel with Australia have been met. The Director-General of Health considers the risk of transmission of COVID-19 from Australia to New Zealand to now be low, and that quarantine-free travel would be safe to commence. Cabinet accepts that advice and is confident not only in the state of Australia, but also in our own ability to manage a travel arrangement. While Queensland has recently undergone an outbreak connected to the border, this too looks contained, and Cabinet believes any residual risk can be managed with additional precautionary processes such as pre-departure testing if needed. On that basis, I can confirm that quarantine-free travel between New Zealand and Australia will commence in just under 2 weeks' time, from 11:59 p.m. Sunday, April 18. This is an important step forward in our COVID response and represents an arrangement I do not believe we have seen in any other part of the world, that is, safely opening up international travel to another country while continuing to pursue a strategy of elimination and a commitment to keeping the virus out. But while quarantine-free travel to Australia and vice versa will start in a fortnight, it will not be what it was pre-COVID. While we absolutely wish to encourage family and friends to reunite and visitors to come and enjoy the hospitality New Zealand is ready and waiting to offer, those undertaking travel on either side of the ditch will do so under the guidance of flyer beware. People will need to plan for the possibility of having travel disrupted if there is an outbreak. But to help people plan ahead and make decisions around their travel, we want to share as much information as we can about our decision making. Just as we have our alert level settings for managing cases in New Zealand, we will also now have a framework for managing an outbreak in Australia. In many ways, we will treat Australia as a region of our own when making decisions on restrictions, albeit one with the complication of multiple internal borders. To help make that work as seamlessly as possible, our officials are already working closely together, and our health teams will be part of calls that discuss new cases that may emerge both here and in Australia. Once we know about a case in Australia, we will have 3 possible responses when it comes to flights and access to our border. And we've captured these with a framework based on continue, pause, or suspend. As you'll see from the material provided, we've set out the types of scenarios that could lead to each response. They broadly follow the kinds of decisions that you'd see if there was a case here. For instance, if a case is found that is quite clearly linked to a border worker and a quarantine facility and is well contained, you'd likely see travel continue in the same way as you would see life continue if that happened here in New Zealand. If, however, a case was found that was not clearly linked to the border and a state responded by a short lockdown to identify more information, we'd likely pause flights from that state in the same way we would stop travel into and out of a region in New Zealand if it were going into a short lockdown. And if we saw multiple cases of unknown origin, we would likely suspend flights for a set period of time. In each of these situations, travellers in an affected state should expect 2 things. First, that they must follow the guidelines given to them locally. Second, that when travel does resume and they're able to come to New Zealand again, they could be asked to do one of 4 things depending on the risk. Either simply monitor their symptoms on return, 2, take a test before they depart, 3, isolate on arrival, or 4, possibly in some situations, go into managed isolation for up to 14 days. These precautions are all part of our preparation to keep COVID out, and of course are not based on hypotheticals. Both countries have had border incursions, and I know neither one of us wishes to export COVID to the other country. These protocols will help ensure that we don't. Many of us haven't travelled abroad for over a year, and I know we expect travel to be different in a COVID environment, and it will be. So I wanted to provide a snapshot of what a traveller coming from Australia to New Zealand can expect, both so they can see how important it is to us that they have a safe experience, but also so Kiwis can hear about the protections that exist at the border. When those in Australia currently make the welcome decision to come to New Zealand, they'll be making a booking on what is called a green zone flight. That means that there will be no passengers on that flight who have come from anywhere but Australia in the last 14 days. They will also be flown by crew who have not flown on any high-risk routes for a set period of time. Passengers will need to provide comprehensive information on how they can be contacted while in New Zealand. They won't be able to travel if they have cold or flu symptoms. When they fly, they will be required to wear a mask on the flight and will also be asked to download and use the New Zealand COVID Tracer app for use while in New Zealand. On arrival, passengers will be taken through what we call the green zones at the airport, meaning there'll be no contact with those who are arriving from other parts of the world and going into managed isolation or quarantine facilities. We will also be undertaking random temperature checks of those arriving as an extra precaution. All of that alongside, of course, the usual welcome that we like to give all those who are either our guests or who are returning to Aotearoa, New Zealand. As you can hear, quite a bit of preparation has been required by airlines and airports, and I thank them for that work. Final infection control audits for airports in particular are occurring over the next 2 weeks. The Ministry of Health expects to have completed these and to report on them on the 16th of April. We will confirm that this has been completed in the days preceding the opening of travel on the 19th. If any airport is found not to be ready, they simply won't be a part of the opening that will be occurring on the 19th of April. The Director General of Health will also give final confirmation of any conditions of travel that may affect Queensland by next Wednesday. Before I conclude, I want to make a final comment on the implication for managed isolation spaces. It is estimated the bubble will free up around 1,000 to 1,300 rooms per fortnight within managed isolation facilities. Of course, there is a range because there is no allocation to Australians or anyone travelling from Australia for rooms. They are just part of the general MIQ bookings. We will retain roughly 500 spaces as contingency, should they be needed as part of the new Trans-Tasman arrangements. We also have a small number of facilities that we consider to have only been suitable for travellers in quarantine from low-risk countries, and indeed some facilities that is what they have been used for alone. With the opening of travel, we will look to decommission these facilities, but in the meantime, we are considering whether they could be used for other low-risk countries, such as the Pacific Islands. As a result of this, we do not anticipate a large number of vacant quarantine spaces to come on stream. Minister Hipkins, though, will make further announcements on this in the coming weeks, and I should add, it does not change the fact that we are separately doing work on whether or not we can enhance the arrangements for family members who have been separated by the border measures. That work continues and will not be affected by these MIQ decisions. Let me be clear though, New Zealanders can still return home and there will still be thousands of spaces in MIQ for those returning citizens and permanent residents. That's how we have helped 130,000 people safely return home through our managed isolation facilities, and at present we have vacancies for some of the first time since I believe October last year, perhaps a reflection of the season that New Zealand is about to enter into as in winter. Finally, this is an exciting day. The Trans-Tasman bubble represents the start of a new chapter in our COVID response and recovery, one that people have worked so hard for, and that makes New Zealand and Australia relatively unique. I know families, friends, and significant parts of our economy will welcome it, as I know I certainly do.